The HoroLogical Seamaster 300M Professional Video is out, and the feedback tells me something important. Not that people wanted just another review, but that people are trying to understand what comes next. Omega doesn't move randomly, and when something changes on the planet ocean, it very rarely stays isolated. If you want to understand where the next Seamaster 300M Professional is heading, you don't look at rumours, you look at engineering decisions that have already been made. I've got my spec slide of the new Seamaster to share. Let's figure this out together. Welcome back to HoroLogical. On the Generation 4 planet ocean, Omega didn't soften it, redesign it or hide it, they removed it entirely, the helium escape valve. That matters far more than most people realise. The helium escape valve was never just a functional component, it became a visual shorthand, a piece of identity that told you instantly this was an Omega dive watch. So when Omega removes it from their most capable professional dive watch, it isn't nostalgia being abandoned, it's a problem that's been engineered out of existence. While I was in the boutique, I asked the obvious question, why now? The answer wasn't aesthetic, it was engineering led. I was told Omega had developed a titanium crystal retaining ring system, a structural solution that reinforces the crystal assembly itself, effectively negating the pressure differential issue the helium escape valve was originally designed to manage. In simple terms, Omega hasn't deleted the valve, they've brute forced it into retirement through materials science and mechanical architecture. Instead of venting pressure after the fact, the system maintains structural integrity at the crystal interface itself. Water resistance is preserved, pressure tolerance is maintained, and the need for an external escape route simply disappears. That reframes the entire decision. This isn't Omega chasing minimalism, it's Omega solving the underlying problem permanently. And now I look at a quick spec slide of the current Generation 4 planet ocean. The case diameter 42mm, thickness 13.8mm, lug width 21mm, the lug to lug 47.5mm. The movement is Omega's 8912 self-winding coaxial automatic caliber. Power reserve 60 hours. The sapphire crystal has AR on both sides. Water resistance 600 metres, and the weight on the rubber strap is 124 grams. And once that engineering solution exists, once it's proven on the planet ocean, it then becomes extremely difficult to justify keeping the valve on the Seamaster 300M. At that point, the valve stops being functional, it becomes styling. Let's look at a spec slide of the current Omega Seamaster 300M Professional. The case material is 316L stainless steel. The case diameter is 42mm, the thickness 13.6mm, the lug width 20mm, the lug to lug 49.9mm. The movement is the Omega 8800 coaxial automatic caliber. Power reserve 55 hours. The crystal is a domed sapphire with AR coating in both sides. Water resistance 300 metres. And on the OEM bracelet sized for a 7-inch wrist, it's 168 grams. Which brings us directly to the next Seamaster. I don't believe the wave dial is going anywhere. We've already seen it evolve. Early Seamaster references used a tight graphic wave pattern, decorative, almost illustrative. The current generation moved to a laser ablated ceramic dial with a looser, more organic execution. Polarising, yes, but undeniably technical. Both versions divided opinion, both are now accepted. The important thing is this: the wave dial is no longer nostalgic, it's become a manufacturing statement. Laser ablation on zirconia ceramic isn't decoration, it's process-driven design. So if the Seamaster changes, it won't abandon the wave, it will reinterpret it again, possibly with more restraint, more depth, or a hybrid execution that sits somewhere between graphic and technical evolution, not erasure. Where things really start to get interesting is the case design. The Generation 4 Planet Ocean doesn't just look different, it is different. The lyre lugs have sharpened, the geometry is more angular, more architectural, more industrial. Chamfer transitions are tighter, more deliberate. The whole watch feels less romantic and more engineered. It's a shift in design language, not brutalism for its own sake, but confidence-led implementation. A watch that no longer feels like it's borrowing visual cues from elsewhere in the catalogue. And if that's the direction Omega is taking at the top of the professional dive range, the Seamaster 300M will almost certainly echo it, but softened for the wider market, thinner, more wearable, less confrontational. Think Planet Ocean confidence filtered through Seamaster's restraint. That's where I expect it to land. Now, there is one long-standing design decision on the Seamaster that I would be genuinely surprised to see carried forward unchanged: the skeletonized handset. From a design perspective, it's clever. It reduces visual mass, it adds lightness, and it gives the dial room to breathe. From a legibility perspective, though, particularly in low light, it has always been a bit of a compromise. Executed well, but compromised nonetheless. And this is where things get really interesting, because Omega has an opportunity here to solve two problems with a single engineering decision. The skeletonized handset could remain, the shape, that is, the identity, the recognisability, but the hollowed out sections could be filled with loom. That one change would materially improve legibility, especially at a glance and underwater. It would also dramatically increase the available loom surface area, which matters more than ever now. We're in the middle of a genuine loom arms race. Micro brands are pushing harder and harder with thicker applications, multiple layers, and more exotic, brighter compounds, longer persistence. In some cases, solid loom blocks are being used purely to maximise energy storage and nighttime performance. Omega doesn't need to outshout them, but it does need to remind people that it can out-engineer them. Filling the skeletonized hands with loom would do exactly that. It would preserve the Seamaster's identity, fix a well-known legibility criticism, and quietly neutralise the growing perception that microbrands are winning on nighttime performance. Two birds, one stone. That would be a very Omega solution. Where things become a little bit more complex is the bezel. I've now gone out of my way to handle enough Planet Ocean Generation 4 examples to say this clearly: Omega can make an excellent bezel. When it's right, it's genuinely world class. I've handled Planet Oceans with zero backplay, beautifully judged resistance, and crisp, confident indexing. Exactly what you want at this level. But I've also handled others that weren't quite there. Some were tighter, some were loose, some exhibited small but noticeable backplay. Not enough to ruin the watch, but enough to change the feel. The issue here isn't quality, it's consistency. And this is where my own buying behaviour starts to shift slightly. Not because the watches aren't good, but because my tolerance for variation is very specific. This situation has quietly put Omega, for me personally, into a category I already understand very well. Seiko collectors will know exactly what I mean. Seiko produces some extraordinary watches, outstanding dials, strong cases, real character, but they are also well known for occasional alignment issues, bezel inserts that are a fraction off, chapter rings that don't quite line up perfectly. Because of that, I would never buy a Seiko sight unseen, not because they're poor watches, but because I want to choose my example. That's now how I feel about Omega's dive watches. Not as a downgrade, not as a criticism, but as a practical adjustment in buying behaviour. After handling enough Planet Ocean Generation 4 examples, I've reached the point where I would only ever buy one in person. I want to turn that bezel myself. I want to feel the resistance, check for play, and make sure the tactile experience matches my own expectations. Because this isn't about right or wrong, it's about subjectivity. Some collectors like a lighter bezel, some prefer something firmer, some won't notice a fraction of backplay at all. I do, and at this level, that's a perfectly reasonable position to take. What this really does is quietly restore the boutique, not just as a place to transact, but as a place to select. At £7,000 or £8,000, $10,000, you're not simply buying a watch, you're procuring a watch, you're choosing the example that feels right for you. That used to be the norm in luxury watchmaking, and in a strange way, Omega's bezel variability has brought that discipline back into strong focus. It's also worth talking briefly about servicing, because this is part of that same conversation. Current Omega service times are running at around 18 weeks. You heard that right, yes, 18 weeks. And that's not unique to Omega, it's an industry-wide issue, but it does tell us something important. There is a genuine shortage of skilled watchmakers. I joked with the boutique manager that perhaps this was the strongest argument he could make yet for someone buying two watches rather than one to wear and one to cover service downtime. But behind that humour, there is a serious point. The same manager spoke openly about Omega's continual investment in watchmaking apprenticeships and training programmes. This isn't something to dismiss. Omega and the wider Swatch Group are actively investing in the continuation of the craft, funding apprenticeships, sponsoring long-term training, and building infrastructure that ensures mechanical watchmaking doesn't hollow out over the next generation. For someone to work in that Planet Ocean Gen 4 watch, it takes 7 years to train to that level. It's also visible in the UK, this investment they're making. Omega now operates a large modern service centre as part of the wider Swatch Group facility in Southampton, a significant investment designed to bring servicing, refurbishment and technical support closer to the market. That facility isn't about marketing, it's about capacity, longevity and control over quality. When you buy into Omega, you're not just buying a watch, you're buying into a brand that is actively investing in the future of the hobby. And that matters more than it used to. Which brings me to the one issue that still hasn't been addressed. The external anti-reflective coating. I'm going to be honest here. I was so surprised when I get early access to the Generation 4 Planet Ocean, and when I asked the question, the answer was Omega is going to continue the practice of AR on the outside of the crystals. That threw me enough in that first impressions video that the removal of the helium escape valve completely escaped me. I was still processing the implications of Omega choosing to continue to do something that collectors have continually raised concerns about for years now. As Omega owners, we know this issue well. The crystal looks spectacular under boutique lighting. In real world wear, the external AR, it marks easily. It doesn't age gracefully. For a watch positioned as a daily luxury tool, that's difficult to ignore. What makes it harder to accept is the contrast, the juxtaposition. Omega has engineered away the helium escape valve through advanced materials science, but continues to apply an external AR coating that struggles long term. In my view, Omega's fixed the wrong problem. That doesn't mean the watches aren't excellent. They are. It means that they're still just short of being truly untouchable in their class. The important takeaway is this: the next Seamaster 300M Professional is coming, and the Planet Ocean Generation 4, that has already told us almost everything we need to know about it. The valve is gone, the wave dial will evolve, not disappear, and the case will become sharper, more architectural. They're going to keep those lyre lugs, but I suspect they're going to chop them flat at the ends. Not as severe as the Planet Ocean, but cut down nonetheless. And now a spec slide of what I think the new 300M Professional will be. Case material, 316L stainless steel. Case diameter, 40mm. Thickness, 15.5mm. Lug width, 20mm. Lug to lug, 48mm. The movement, the Omega automatic coaxial caliber, 8800. Power reserve, 55 hours. The crystal, sapphire domed AR both sides. Water resistance, 300 metres. And it would weigh 118 grams on an OEM rubber strap. And the handset, leave the hour hand skeletonized and fully fill in the minute hand with loom. Controversial. The overall design will be tempered more towards daily wear usage. The hands may finally become as legible as the rest of the watch deserves. Finishing will remain a strength, and some long-standing questions will remain unanswered. Omega is closer than it ever has been before, and if they tighten tolerances when it matters the most, the next Seamaster could be genuinely exceptional. Because watch collecting, it isn't logical, but it is horological.